Some men see hell on a battlefield. I saw it delivered in a wagon. It arrived at dawn, a battered wreck pulled by a mule that looked like it had already given up on life. It just sat there at the edge of my property, a place I'd chosen specifically because nothing ever arrived. Out here in the Arizona desert, you could go a year without seeing a soul. That's how I liked it. Emptiness was a good cure for a man full of bad memories. But this wagon, it felt wrong. The air around it was heavy, still. A kind of stillness I remembered from the war. The quiet that comes right after the screaming stops. I grabbed my Winchester, the cold steel a familiar weight in my hands, and walked out to meet whatever devil had decided to pay me a visit. The morning sun was already hot, beating down on the hard-packed earth. 20 yards out I stopped. There were no tracks leading away, just the wagon, the mule, and a canvas tarp in the back, hiding something underneath. Tucked into the rope holding the canvas down was a piece of paper, a note. I pulled it free. 4 words scrawled in rough handwriting. Debt paid in full. I didn't owe anyone a damn thing. Not out here. My debts were older, paid in blood, and buried under years of silence. My hand went to the canvas, hesitating for just a second. Whatever was under there, I knew it was going to drag me right back into the world I'd spent a decade trying to escape. I pulled it back. And that's when I smelled it. Not just blood and sweat. It was the smell of human misery, a scent you never forget once you've known it. Curled on her side, bound with ropes, lay a woman. Her dress was in tatters, her back a crisscross of wounds, some old, some sickeningly fresh, and burned into the skin between her shoulder blades. A single, perfectly etched word. Sin. For a second I couldn't breathe. The world tilted, the desert sun fading to the orange glow of burning villages. I saw faces I'd tried to forget, heard screams I'd tried to drink away. The ghost that followed me from the war was suddenly standing right beside me, whispering in my ear. The woman stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she looked at me through a haze of pain. Her lips, cracked and bleeding, parted. "You paid for me," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. "Now finish it." Hell isn't a battlefield. Hell is a person, carved up and left on your doorstep while the monster who did it thinks he's done you a favor. I didn't know who she was or what debt she was supposed to be paying, but I knew one thing. Whoever sent her here had just started a war they had no idea how to win. I carried her inside, the blood from her wounds seeping into my shirt. She was light, too light, like a bird with broken wings. I laid her on the bed in my spare room, a room that hadn't seen a visitor in 10 years. The sheets smelled of dust and loneliness. I worked methodically, the way the army had taught me. Cut the ropes, cleaned the wounds with whiskey and water. She drifted in and out, muttering things I couldn't understand, her skin burning with fever. As I tended to the brand on her back, I saw the deliberate cruelty of it. This wasn't a punishment. This was a message, a mark of ownership. By sunset, I had done all I could. She was sleeping, her breathing shallow but steady. I sat in a chair by the window, my rifle across my knees, and watched the empty road leading to my ranch. The note said debt paid in full, but I knew this wasn't an ending. It was a down payment. Someone had sent her to me for a reason, and they'd be back to collect. As darkness fell, she stirred again, her eyes opening for just a moment. They were unfocused, searching the room for something that wasn't there. "Sarah," she whispered, "my little girl." Then she was gone again, pulled back under by the pain. Sarah, a daughter. The stakes of this twisted game just got a whole lot higher. I stayed in that chair all night, watching, waiting. Dawn found me still there, my eyes gritty, my gut twisted in a knot of old instincts. I went outside to check the horses and climbed the small rise behind my house. From there you could see for miles. And that's when I saw it, just a tiny glint of light on the eastern ridge, reflecting off glass. Someone was watching me, watching the ranch. The game, whatever it was, had officially begun, and I'd been drafted without my consent. But if there was one thing I knew how to do, it was how to play a game where the other guy makes all the rules, and then break every single one of them. For 3 days, she was a ghost in my house, and I was a ghost in my own life. I changed her bandages. I spooned broth between her lips, and every morning, the watcher on the ridge appeared, a silent sentinel reminding me that my little pocket of emptiness had been invaded. On the fourth morning, I came back from the stables to find her sitting up in bed. Her eyes were clear for the first time. She flinched when I walked in, pressing herself against the headboard like a cornered animal. "You're safe," I said, keeping my voice low. "No one's going to hurt you here." She studied me, her gaze sharp and intelligent. "Where am I?" "My ranch, 5 miles west of Tombstone." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by a flash of something else. Calculation. "You're Miles Sullivan," she said. It wasn't a question. "Former Army scout. Served under General Sherman." A cold chill went down my spine. "How do you know that?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "My husband was a newspaper man. He collected stories." She took a breath, her composure hardening. "My name is Rebecca Morgan. They took me 2 months ago. They took my daughter, Sarah." "Who's they?" I asked, though I already had a feeling I knew the answer. "Tombstone was run by one man. Judge Porter," she confirmed. "My husband was investigating him for corruption. After they killed my husband, I kept asking questions." Her hand went to her back, to the brand hidden beneath the clean bandages. "The judge decided to make an example of me. He sold me." My gut tightened. This was no random delivery. This was a targeted strike. Why here? Why me? Her eyes met mine, and they were filled with a terrifying, desperate fire. "Because I arranged it," she said, and the floor dropped out from under me. "I made sure I was sold to you." What? She arranged it? This half-dead, tortured woman had somehow manipulated one of the most powerful men in the territory to deliver her right to my door. It didn't make any sense. "Why?" I demanded, the single word hanging in the air between us. "Because you're a killer, Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Everyone in Tombstone knows the story. The reclusive soldier who can't outrun his ghost. They say you left a trail of bodies from Atlanta to the sea." Her gaze was unflinching. "I need someone who isn't afraid to make more. I need you to help me get my daughter back." I stood up, turning away from her. The room felt too small, the air too thick. "You've made a mistake. I'm not that man anymore. I don't fight other people's battles. This became your battle the moment they left me at your door," she said quietly from the bed. "Porter knows I'm here. He's watching. He's waiting for me to be well enough to talk. And when he comes, he'll come for you too." She was right. I was already in it. But going after a man like Porter in his own town, that was suicide. "If he comes here, I'll deal with him," I said, my voice grim. "But I'm not riding into Tombstone looking for trouble." As I turned to leave, her sleeve pulled back. A small piece of folded paper slipped out from a hidden pocket in her dress and fell onto the blanket. Before she could snatch it back, I saw what it was. A child's drawing. A little girl and a woman holding hands. And underneath, in shaky letters, "I love you, Mama." The air left my lungs. For a split second, I wasn't in my ranch house in Arizona. I was back in a burned-out farmhouse in Georgia, staring at a child's toy in the ashes. The same haunted look I saw in her eyes was the one I'd been seeing in my own reflection for 15 years. I had failed to save my family. The world had found me again, and it was offering me a chance to atone, or a chance to die trying. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer hiding. I was hunting. Over the next few days, as Rebecca's body healed, a silent war was waged on my front porch. Every night I'd sit out there with a bottle of whiskey, my only company, and fight the ghosts that came crawling out of the darkness. On the sixth night, she joined me. She didn't ask, just sat in the other chair, the one that had been empty since my wife died. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars spill across the black sky. "Why here?" she finally asked. "Why this place?" "Wanted emptiness," I said, the whiskey making the words easier. "Too many years around people. Too many voices." "And what did you hear when you finally found the quiet?" she pressed. "Nothing good," I admitted. "That's why I stay. To keep the devils contained." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. "My husband, Thomas, he was like that after the war. But he found his way back by seeking the truth." "Truth is overrated," I grumbled. "Mostly just gets people hurt." Lies hurt more. She let that hang in the air, then changed the subject. The rider on the ridge. He's one of Porter's men. They're waiting for me to be well enough to talk. Talk about what? She hesitated, then leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Porter isn't just corrupt. He's looking for something. A treasure. Union gold hidden during the war. I stared at her. This just kept getting crazier. My husband found part of a map, she continued. Before they took me, I hid it. I hid it with Sarah. My blood ran cold. The little girl wasn't just a hostage. She was the key. Where? I asked her when her doll. A child's toy, standing between a monster like Porter and a fortune. It was the cruelest thing I'd ever heard. So you think I can help you find this treasure? I asked, my voice hard. No, she said, her eyes flashing in the dim light. I want my daughter back. The gold can stay buried forever for all I care. But Porter won't stop until he has that map. Sarah will never be safe as long as he's alive. The implication was clear. She wasn't asking for a rescue mission. She was asking for an assassination. I stood up, walking to the edge of the porch, my back to her. I had a son, I said, the words tasting like ash. And a wife. They died of fever while I was away hunting a man for the government. I was good at it. Too good. And while I was tracking a stranger across Tennessee, my own family needed me. I turned to face her, letting her see all the broken pieces. So don't talk to me about fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. I've already failed the people who needed me most. She didn't flinch. She just looked at me, her gaze steady and clear. Then help me not fail my daughter. The next morning, I told her I was riding into town for supplies. She wanted to come, but she was still too weak, too recognizable. I'll ask around about Sarah, I promised. Carefully, but you stay here. There's a shotgun under my bed. Anyone comes who isn't me, you use it. Before I left, she asked the question that had been hanging between us since she arrived. What if you don't come back? Then ride west, I said simply. Don't ever look back. Tombstone was a circus, a thin veneer of civilization painted over the same old greed and violence. I went to the Oriental Saloon, the black heart of the town's information network. I wasn't there for 2 minutes before a ghost from the past slid into the chair opposite me. Doc Holliday, or what was left of him. Tuberculosis had whittled him down to a shadow, but his eyes were still sharp as a razor. Well, well, he wheezed. The hermit emerges from his cave. You're about as social as a rattlesnake with a toothache. I cut to the chase. Tell me about Judge Porter. Doc's good humor vanished. Porter's building an empire on bones, he said, his voice low. Land, property, people. He calls it indentured servitude. We all know it's slavery. The last newspaper editor who asked too many questions ended up dead in an alley. Thomas Morgan, Rebecca's husband. What about a little girl? I asked. 7 years old, named Sarah. Doc's eyes narrowed. You're playing with fire, Miles. Just answer the question. He sighed, a rattling sound from deep in his chest. Porter's got an estate outside of town, a fortress. Rumor is he keeps a special guest there. If he has the girl, that's where she'll be. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. Listen to me. Porter is not just a corrupt judge. He's obsessed. He's looking for some old war treasure. A man like that, with that kind of power and obsession, he'll burn the whole world down to get what he wants. As I left the saloon, I saw him, standing in the upper window of the courthouse, a tall man in a black suit. Judge Porter. He was watching me. He knew I was in his town. The game had just escalated. The ride back was tense. I felt eyes on me the whole way. As I neared my property, I saw the watcher on the ridge. But this time, he didn't stay put. He turned his horse and rode directly towards my ranch. I spurred my horse, pulling my Winchester from its holster. We met in a cloud of dust 100 yards from my house. That's far enough, I yelled, leveling the rifle at his chest. The rider was Native American, older than me, his face a road map of hard years. He raised his empty hands. I'm not here to fight, Sullivan. Who are you? My people call me Eagle Eye, he said, his voice calm. I have been waiting for you to remember who you are. My finger tightened on the trigger. You know nothing about me. I know you rode with Sherman, he said, and his dark eyes seemed to pierce right through me. I know you burned villages, because my village was one of them. I watched from the hills as my home turned to ash. A cold knot formed in my stomach. If you're here for revenge, get on with it. He shook his head. If I wanted you dead, you would have been dead years ago. I am here because we have a common enemy. He nodded towards my ranch. That woman, her fight is now your fight, and your fight is mine. What's your stake in this? I demanded. The treasure Porter seeks is not just gold, Eagle Eye said, his voice hardening. It is proof. Documents that show this land was given to my people, the Apache, by treaty. Porter wants the gold, but he must destroy the documents to get it. My mind raced. This was bigger than a kidnapping, bigger than a treasure hunt. Porter has a piece of the map, Eagle Eye continued. The woman's husband found it. But there are other pieces. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a piece of yellowed parchment. Like this one. Before I could process this new twist, a gunshot echoed from the ranch house. Then another. My heart stopped. Rebecca. I wheeled my horse around and galloped towards the house, Eagle Eye right behind me. The front door was open. I burst inside, rifle ready. Rebecca stood in the main room, the shotgun smoking in her hands. On the floor lay one of Porter's men, a pool of blood spreading around him. He came through the window, she said, her voice steady as a rock. Said the judge sent him to bring me back. She looked at me, her eyes hard as diamonds. I told you they would come. In the dead man's pocket, I found his orders from Porter. And something else, a small photograph. A little girl with dark hair, holding a cloth doll. Sarah, Rebecca whispered, her hand trembling as she took the picture. She's alive. That was it. The last piece of the man I used to be, the man who just wanted to be left alone, died right there on that floor. I looked from the dead man to Rebecca's fierce, determined face, then to Eagle Eye standing in the doorway. An enemy, an ally, a victim, 3 broken people against an army. Pack what you can carry, I told Rebecca. We leave in an hour. Where are we going? I looked at the orange glow of the setting sun, the color of blood and fire. I lit a match and tossed it onto the curtains. To war, I said. We rode into the darkness, the flames of my burning ranch lighting up the sky behind us. It was a message to Porter. The hermit was done hiding. The game had a new player. We made camp in a narrow canyon, a place Eagle Eye knew from his youth. No fire. Too dangerous. Just the 3 of us, sharing jerky and hardtack in the pre-dawn chill. We need the other pieces of the map, Eagle Eye stated. You said your daughter has one. Hidden in her doll, Rebecca confirmed, but she's in Porter's estate. It's a fortress. So we attack the fortress? I asked. Suicide, Eagle Eye said flatly. We need the 3rd piece first. It gives us leverage. It completes the path to the documents. Who has it? Rebecca asked. A man in Tombstone, Eagle Eye replied. A banker named James Holloway. He was once a Union officer who helped my father hide the documents and the gold. A banker. This web just got more and more tangled. Porter must know about him, I reasoned. He suspects, Eagle Eye confirmed, but Holloway is a powerful man. Porter can't just make him disappear like a newspaper editor. To move against him, he needs proof. So our next move was clear. We had to get to Holloway. But how do you walk into a town that's actively hunting you? We don't go as ourselves, I said, a grim plan forming in my mind. The next day, Tombstone saw some new arrivals. An old Apache horse trader, leading a fine-looking cavalry-bred animal. A quiet woman in a bonnet, selling eggs in the market. And a traveling salesman with a clean-shaven face and clothes that didn't quite fit. Eagle Eye walked straight into Holloway's bank. He used a code phrase about Sherman's horse and was shown into the banker's private office. Holloway was an old soldier. You could see it in his posture. He recognized Eagle Eye immediately. Why now? Holloway asked, his voice tense. Porter is close, Eagle Eye told him. The time has come. Holloway didn't hesitate. Turns out he'd been waiting for this day for 20 years. He gave Eagle Eye a key to a safe deposit box in a different bank. Smart man. Inside, he said, was his piece of the map and a brand new Remington rifle, a contribution to the cause. But he gave us something even more valuable. Information, a survey map of Porter's estate, and a weakness. The water supply, Holloway explained, his finger tracing a line on the map. It comes from a creek, through a pipe that enters the cellar. A man could crawl through it. He also told us that a high-ranking government official was arriving the next day to meet with Porter about the Apache land claims. That was our window. Porter would be distracted. Meanwhile, Rebecca was in the market listening. She learned that Porter had a little girl locked in a room on the second floor of the East Wing. It was Sarah. She was alive. We met up in a grove of trees outside town. We had the location, we had an entry point, and we had a timeline. But as we were getting ready to leave, we saw them. The sheriff and two deputies riding straight for us. We had to brazen it out. I pretended to be a widower named Samuel Parker, traveling with my sister and our Indian guide. The sheriff eyed us with suspicion. His gaze lingered on Rebecca, whose face was hidden by her bonnet. "We're looking for a woman," the sheriff said, his hand resting on his gun. "Injured, traveling with a white man and an Indian." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I shook my head, offered some lie about the road being quiet, and prayed he'd buy it. For a long, agonizing moment, he just stared. Then he nodded. "Safe travels, Mr. Parker." He rode on. We didn't breathe until they were specks in the distance. That was too close. Way too close. Porter was using the law now, turning the whole territory into a cage. We fled to a line shack on Holloway's property, a hidden refuge where we could make our final plan. As night fell, I knew what I had to do. "I'll scout the estate tonight," I announced. "See this water pipe for myself." Rebecca's eyes were full of worry. "Be careful," she said softly. The words hit me harder than any bullet. It had been a long, long time since anyone had cared if I came back alive. I moved through the darkness like a ghost, just like the old days. Porter's estate was exactly as Holloway described, a fortress crawling with guards. I found the creek, the stand of cottonwoods, and the water intake. The grate was secured with a rusty old padlock. Easy. The pipe was just big enough to crawl through. It was a viable way in. As I was about to slip away, I heard voices. Two guards talking. "Heard the little girl's been crying for her mother again," one of them said. "Nah, Porter needs her," the other replied with a chuckle. "He knows the mother will come for her. It's a trap. He'll have them both, in the map piece she's carrying." I felt a cold rage settle over me. Porter wasn't just waiting for us. He was counting on a mother's love to be his greatest weapon. He was about to find out what happens when that love has a former Army scout and an Apache warrior on its side. The government man arrived right at noon, just like Holloway said he would. From a hill overlooking the town, we watched Porter greet him, all smiles and handshakes. A snake welcoming another snake into his nest. "That's our cue," I said. Rebecca, Eagle Eye, and I had positioned ourselves in a dry wash near the estate. The plan was simple and insane. Eagle Eye and I would go in through the pipe. Rebecca would wait with the horses, our only way out. "If we're not back by sunset," I told her, "ride for Tucson. Find the federal marshal." She just shook her head, pressing a small, folded drawing into my hand. It was Sarah's drawing. "I love you, Mama." "Give this to her," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "so she knows I came for her." I nodded, tucking it safely in my pocket. "I promise," I said, and I meant it. The journey through the pipe was a crawl through a cold, dark, metal throat. It felt like being buried alive. We came up through a grate into the estate's cellar. Stone walls, shelves of provisions, and the smell of damp earth. We moved up a servant's staircase and into the kitchen. A Mexican woman was working alone, kneading dough. She saw us, her eyes wide with fear. Before she could scream, Eagle Eye spoke to her in rapid-fire Spanish. Her expression changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was hope. She pointed us towards a side door. "The child is upstairs," Eagle Eye whispered to me as we slipped out. "Second floor, east wing, blue door, one guard." "Why did she help us?" I asked. "Porter took her son, sold him to the mines." Of course, the man's cruelty was his own undoing. He'd built his fortress on the backs of people he'd broken, never imagining they might one day help tear it down. We moved through the house like shadows. We could hear Porter's voice, entertaining his guest. We found the blue door. A single, bored-looking guard stood outside. There was no time for a complex plan. I walked right up to him, a derringer hidden in my palm. Before he could react, the little gun was pressed against his ribs. Not a sound, I hissed. We disarmed him, tied him up, and stashed him in an empty room. I used his keys to open the blue door, and there she was, a little girl sitting on a big bed, clutching a cloth doll. She had her mother's eyes. "We're friends of your mother," I said softly. I showed her the drawing. Her face lit up. She knew. She slid off the bed, her little hand clutching the doll. "Penny comes too," she said. "Of course," I agreed. Just as we were about to leave, Eagle Eye tensed. "Someone comes." We heard footsteps in the hall. We had nowhere to run. I shoved Sarah into a large wardrobe, whispering for her to be silent no matter what happened. We flattened ourselves on either side of the door, guns ready. The handle turned, and then all hell broke loose. Shouting, breaking glass, a gunshot from the courtyard below. The footsteps in the hall suddenly retreated, running towards the new commotion. I looked out the window, and I saw her, Rebecca, riding one of the horses straight for the main house, firing a rifle into the air. "Damn it!" I swore under my breath. She was supposed to wait. She couldn't stand it. She created her own diversion. A crazy, reckless, beautiful diversion. The mother grew impatient, Eagle Eye observed with a stoic calm. We must adapt. We had to use the chaos. We grabbed Sarah and ran, heading back the way we came. The house was in an uproar. Guards were running everywhere, trying to deal with the woman on horseback who was creating havoc in their courtyard. The cook who'd helped us pointed us toward the cellar, her face lit with a fierce joy. We scrambled down the stairs, heading for the pipe. Our escape was just feet away. Then the cellar door burst open. Two of Porter's men stood there, guns raised. Eagle Eye fired the Remington. The first man dropped. The second got off a shot before Eagle Eye's next bullet found him. I felt a white-hot poker slam into my left shoulder. The force of it threw me against the wall, my vision turning to black and white static. When my head cleared, the two men were dead. Sarah was frozen in terror, and blood was pouring from a hole in my shoulder. We heard more shouting from above. They were coming. "Go," Eagle Eye said, shoving me towards the pipe. "Take the child. I will hold them here." "No," I started to argue. "There is no time," he commanded. "The pipe is too slow for all of us. I will find another way." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the warrior he was. He was ready to die. Sarah, seeing the gravity of the moment, did something extraordinary. She walked up to this fearsome Apache warrior and pressed her doll, Penny, into his hands. "For luck," she said. A flicker of something, surprise, tenderness, crossed Eagle Eye's face. He tucked the doll into his belt. "The documents are what matter," he said to me. "Finish what we started." I pulled myself into the pipe, Sarah scrambling in behind me. The last thing I heard was the cellar door crashing open, Eagle Eye's defiant war cry, and the thunder of the Remington rifle. Then there was only darkness, the sound of rushing water, and the knowledge that a good man was about to die for us. Pain is a liar. It tells you to stop. It tells you you're finished. Crawling through that dark, wet pipe with a bullet hole in my shoulder, the pain was screaming at me. But there was another sound behind me, Sarah's small, frightened breaths. That was the only voice I listened to. We burst out of the pipe into the harsh sunlight. Gunfire was still erupting from the estate. Rebecca's diversion, and now Eagle Eye's last stand, had turned the place into a hornet's nest. We had to move. We hadn't gone half a mile before we heard them. Riders, spreading out from the estate, fanning across the desert, hunting us. I scooped Sarah up, ignoring the fire that shot through my shoulder, and sprinted for a shallow ravine. We dove into it just as they crested a nearby hill. We heard them stop right above us. "Porter wants the kid alive," one of them said. The other, "Shoot on sight." They rode on. We were safe for now. But my strength was fading fast. The bleeding wasn't stopping. We made it to the rendezvous point, the grove of trees where we'd left the horses. They were gone. Rebecca was gone. A cold dread washed over me. Had she been captured, killed, or had she been forced to flee? We were alone, wounded and stranded, with a private army hunting us. We found a small cave to hide in. I tried to bandage my wound, but my vision was starting to blur at the edges. Sarah, bless her heart, was trying to be brave. My papa taught me about wounds, she said, her little voice echoing in the cave. He said you need clean water and honey. She then asked me a question with the brutal honesty only a child possesses. Are you a good man or a bad man, mister? I thought of the men I'd killed, the villages I'd burned. I thought of my wife and son, who I'd failed. I've done both good and bad things, I told her. But right now, I'm trying to do good. As the afternoon shadows grew long, Sarah finally fell asleep. I kept watch, fighting to stay conscious. Just when I thought all was lost, I saw her. A lone rider, cautiously approaching. Rebecca. I used a small mirror to flash a signal. She saw it and rode towards us. She was hurt, a bandage on her arm, but she was alive. When she saw Sarah, she practically fell out of the saddle. The reunion was a desperate, sobbing embrace that I had no right to witness. You're wounded, she said, finally noticing the state I was in. It'll keep, I said. Where's Eagle Eye? Her face fell. I don't know. I was pursued, had to lose them in the hills. My horse went lame. I found this one wandering free. So Eagle Eye was gone. And worse, Sarah's doll, and the map piece inside it, was gone with him. If Porter's men had captured him, that meant the judge now had two pieces of the map. He was closer than ever to his prize. We had one horse between the three of us. Our only choice was a desperate one. Ride for Tombstone and pray that the banker, Holloway, would shelter us. We rode through the night, a wounded, exhausted trio on a single overburdened horse. I was fading in and out, the world a swirl of pain and darkness. We snuck into town through back alleys, making our way to Holloway's house. He took us in without a second's hesitation. Rebecca, it turned out, knew a thing or two about medicine. Her father had been a doctor. She cleaned and stitched my wound with a steady hand, her touch both professional and gentle. You saved my daughter today, she said softly as she worked. Whatever you did before, that's something to be proud of. I slept for the first time in what felt like a year, a deep, dreamless sleep of pure exhaustion. I woke at dawn to find Rebecca sitting in a chair by the window, a revolver in her lap, keeping watch. She hadn't slept at all. Just as the sun was rising, the door burst open. It was Holloway, his face grim. Porter's men are in town, he said, his voice urgent. They're going door to door. They know you're here. We were trapped. The whole town was a cage and the bars were closing in. They're watching the streets, Holloway said, pointing out the window to the neighboring rooftop. But they're not watching the sky. There's nothing quite like the feeling of running for your life across the rooftops of a town that wants you dead. We scrambled from one building to the next, me with my arm in a sling, Rebecca moving with a grim determination that I was coming to admire more and more. Holloway had a plan. He'd arranged for horses at a livery stable 3 blocks over. His housekeeper was already there with Sarah, who was dressed as a boy to avoid recognition. As we reached the stable, we heard shouting from the main street. Holloway's people were creating a diversion, drawing Porter's men away. We mounted up and rode out the back, melting into the alleys just as the town erupted in chaos. We rode south, away from the mountains, away from the treasure. Our only goal was to disappear. But Porter was like a bloodhound. By midday, we saw the dust cloud behind us. 8 riders with the judge himself at their head. There was no outrunning them. There, I yelled, pointing to a cluster of large boulders rising out of the desert floor. We make our stand there. It was a desperate, last-ditch defense. I sent Rebecca and Sarah into the most protected spot while I climbed to the top of the largest boulder to get a firing position. Porter and his men surrounded us, just out of rifle range. It's over, Sullivan. Porter's voice boomed across the empty space. Give me the map pieces and the girl, and I'll let you live. He was lying. We all knew it. How much time can we buy? Rebecca asked, her rifle ready beside me. Not enough, I said grimly. And then she told me. I sent a message with Holloway's housekeeper, she said, her voice low, to my husband's cousin, Lieutenant Hayes at Fort Huachuca. The cavalry, a sliver of hope, as thin as a razor's edge. But the fort was hours away. We had minutes. Time's up, Porter roared. He raised his arm to signal the attack. This was it. The end of the line. We raised our rifles, ready to sell our lives dearly. And then a single gunshot cracked through the air. It didn't come from us. It came from the west. One of Porter's men jerked in his saddle and fell to the ground. Everyone froze. Another shot. Another of Porter's men went down. A ghost shooter, picking them off with impossible precision. Then we heard it, a high, ululating war cry that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. From behind a distant ridge, a single rider appeared, charging like a demon out of hell. It was Eagle Eye. He wasn't dead, and he was furious. Porter's men panicked. They were caught between us and the rocks and the Apache warrior charging at them. As they broke formation, I saw my chance. I lined up my sights on Porter's chest, but before I could squeeze the trigger, a new line of riders appeared on the horizon. Not thugs, soldiers, blue uniforms, the U.S. cavalry. Rebecca's message had gotten through. Porter saw them, and his face for the first time showed fear. He spurred his horse, fleeing east towards a narrow canyon, two of his men following him. Eagle Eye, ignoring the soldiers, angled his charge to pursue him. "Stay with Sarah!" I yelled to Rebecca. I slid down the rock, grabbed my horse, and rode after them. This wasn't about the gold anymore. It wasn't even about the documents. This was about justice. Porter was not getting away. The chase was a mad dash across the desert. Me, Eagle Eye, and the devil himself. Porter was riding for his life, but we were riding for something more. We were riding for every life he had destroyed. I cut across a stretch of rough terrain, a risky shortcut to head him off at the canyon entrance. Porter saw me coming and fired his pistol. The shot went wide. I returned fire, not aiming for him, but for his horse. The animal went down hard, throwing the judge to the ground. His two men didn't even look back. They just disappeared into the canyon. I reined in, my rifle trained on Porter as he struggled to his feet. Eagle Eye arrived a moment later, blood streaming from a fresh wound in his side, but his eyes were blazing. "You've ruined everything," Porter spat, his fine suit covered in dust, his face a mask of hate. "I have friends in Washington. You think this ends here?" "It ends right here, Porter," I said. He laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Then his hand moved, pulling a derringer from his sleeve. I fired. The bullet hit him square in the chest. He staggered, but he didn't fall. He raised his own gun. Before he could fire, another shot boomed beside me, Eagle Eye's Remington. Porter jerked backward, a look of pure shock on his face, and then he collapsed into the dust, his dead eyes staring up at the unforgiving Arizona sky. It was over. Eagle Eye slowly dismounted, leaning heavily against his horse. From his belt, he pulled a cloth doll. Penny, miraculously unharmed. "The child will want this returned," he said simply. The cavalry rode up then, led by a young Lieutenant Hayes. He took in the scene, the dead judge, the wounded scout, the bleeding Apache warrior. "Mrs. Morgan said you might need assistance," the lieutenant said with a wry smile. "Appears she was right." We went back to the rocks. Rebecca ran to meet us, Sarah in her arms. When she saw we were both alive, and that Porter was not, the look on her face was something I'll never forget. It was grief and relief and peace, all rolled into one. Eagle Eye, with a solemn dignity, returned Penny the doll to Sarah. "Did she help you be brave?" Sarah asked. "Very brave," Eagle Eye confirmed. "She saved my life." The little girl beamed, hugging the doll tight. With Porter's remaining men in custody, we had one last thing to do, the documents. Eagle Eye, despite his wound, led us deep into the Dragoon Mountains, to a sacred cave hidden behind a waterfall of rock. Inside we found them, the treaties that proved the Apache owned this land, and with them, a chest of Union gold. The treasure was real, but the paper was worth more than the gold. It was a people's future. As we emerged from the cave, back into the twilight, Rebecca came and stood beside me. "What will you do now?" she asked. My ranch was burned to the ground. My old life was gone. I looked at her and at Sarah, who was showing a young soldier the gold coin Eagle Eye had given her for bravery. I looked at Eagle Eye, who was preparing to ride north to bring the news to his people. He caught my eye and gave a slight nod. A farewell between brothers. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And for the first time in 15 years, that felt good. It felt like a beginning. Hayes offered me a teaching position at the fort, Rebecca said, her eyes searching mine. A place for Sarah to be safe. They need men who know the territory, men who know how to survive out here. It wasn't just a job offer, it was an invitation, a chance to stop running from the ghosts of the past and build something new with the people who had helped me face them. I mounted my horse and moved it next to hers. Sarah smiled up at me, a brilliant, trusting smile that warmed a part of my soul I thought had frozen over long ago. Ready? Rebecca asked. I looked at the vast, star-filled sky above us. The desert, which had been my hiding place, my tomb, had somehow become the place I was reborn. I smiled back, a real smile. Ready. They say they don't write songs about the kind of evil that hides behind money and power, and maybe they don't. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to write your own ending. And this one was a hell of a lot better than a song. If this story of justice in the Old West kept you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor and absolutely destroy that subscribe button. And drop a comment below letting me know which twist you didn't see coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.